Hi, welcome to the Maricopa Association of Governments. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, you can do so by using your phone to scan this QR code, also found at the sign-in table. Follow the prompts and select the items you would like to comment on. You can also sign up for public comment using one of the tablets provided. 3 opportunities are provided for public comment at today's meeting, including call to the audience during the consent agenda and for any action items to be heard. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the chair requests an exception to this limit. Call to the audience is for comment on items not on the agenda that fall under the jurisdiction of MAG, or on items that are on the agenda for discussion or information but not for action. Those wishing to comment on action items will be provided the opportunity at the time the item is heard. Once you approach the podium, you will have 3 minutes to complete your comments. A timer is provided to assist you. If you parked in the garage, a validation stamp is available on the information table in the hallway. For those who purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. Thank you again for joining us today and for your interest in our region.
Good morning, members of the Transportation Policy Committee. This meeting is now called to order. And can I just say, I love that video. That is fantastic. And I just appreciate not having to get so out of breath first part of the meeting. So I do appreciate that. I do have a couple other things to go over. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. We will now begin with a roll call of all members.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Transportation Policy Committee. I will go down the list of members alphabetically. Please unmute and indicate you are present. David Barry, Councilmember Butler, Jen Daniels, thank you. Doug DeCluson,
present.
Thank you. Councilmember Edwards, Mayor Freeman,
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Gallego, thank you. Councilmember Garlett, thank you. John Graham,
Present.
thank you. Councilmember Haney.
I'm here.
Oh, thank you. Councilmember Manfredi.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Osborne. Tyler Pace. Mayor Pizzillo. Councilmember Poston. Present. Thank you. Mark Reardon. Thank you. Mayor Wires. Chair Wheatley.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councilmember White.
I'm present.
Thank you. Councilmember Whitehead. Mayor Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. Is there anything that I missed? Madam Chair, we have quorum.
Excellent. Thank you. If you would please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And before we proceed, I would like to introduce our newest members with us. Next to me, we have Mayor Mark Freeman from the City of Mesa. And next to him, we have Councilmember Jane Poston from the City of Chandler. And we also have Councilmember Solich Whitehead from the City of Scottsdale. So we do want to welcome them and look forward to working with them. Our next item is call to the audience, and I have received 2 requests to speak for call to the audience. We will start with, we have Andrew Marwick. And if you would please step to the podium, we do have.
Yes. Hello, thank you, Chair. Valley Metro is proposing to build simultaneously out to Desert Sky 2 light rail lines, one along the north bank of the I-10 and the other down Indian School Road. There's quite a few disadvantages to that. That's a lot of money to put into a very fixed system that cannot be changed easily. For example, if they later want to continue on to Avondale or up to Westgate area in Glendale or whatever, The cost will be very high to do that. So it's a very expensive infrastructure. It's difficult to impossible to change. For example, Chicago commuter rail system is stuck with a system that was designed in the 1800s, and they haven't been able to change anything. It just is really good for taking people in and out of downtown Chicago. And post-COVID, that business is down roughly 50% and has kind of stabilized at that down 50% level. So a fixed rail system has that big disadvantage. Um, and then the other thing is if you look along South Central, that's still under construction with barricades and things. And it's a very long, slow process with the construction with the very long negative impacts on neighboring residents and businesses. Bus rapid transit is far more flexible and much lower cost. For example, in Utah County between Provo and Utah Valley University in Orem, they put in a 10-mile system a few years ago for about $200 million. They're now looking at going up and down through Utah County up to near the Salt Lake County line. A system there would be they're talking about roughly $30 million a mile, or much less than the Valley Metro is looking at for the light rail. Minneapolis has some comparable lines to the Indian School line. It's a bus rapid transit running north out of the F line, running north out of downtown into Blaine. And that's they're looking at a little over $100 million for a 12-mile line there. They'll mostly be curb running. But the biggest advantages of bus rapid transit, it's the same thing as light rail. If you're collecting the fare off board, if you aren't collecting from a fare box, and if you're boarding on a platform level of all doors, that speeds things up dramatically. That's your biggest time savings. And also the other thing that's important to riders is the headway. That the light rail here, if you every time you cut the headway from 20 minutes to 15 to 10 minutes, you're attracting a lot more riders. That's your biggest attractor there to ridership. And so I think that the light rail is too fixed, it's too expensive, and I think that really it should take another look at bus rapid transit um, for those lines. Instead of extending light rail, more bus rapid transit in the van.
Thank you, Mr. Marwick. We appreciate that. And next we have Diane Barker. You have three minutes. Thank you.
Yes. Good morning, Chairwoman Wheatley and Transportation, and Happy New Year. It's good to see you here. And, you know, I support what our gentleman just said here. He's from Chicago. That's where I first started learning transit. I grew up, like maybe many of you, in a suburb in Ohio where they had taken out the trolley. It had come out to where I was, but right around when I was born, it was out. So I know the advantage. I left a car in Chicago to go downtown during the Larry Lujack time, Chickaman, and to Marshall Fields is where I was in the buying program. But what I'd like to say today, you passed the referendum in regards to this light rail. The capital money's going to have to come from the federal government. So if you want to contact the federal government about this, because we have money for maintenance and we're going to need that. The system needs that. Buses need that. But we need to be very, very tight with our money. Times are tough. They're really tough with our neighbor. And I just can't believe what happened in California. We're going to get more people here, not only from there, but other places, even though it's hot and dry here and unsufferable many times. It doesn't have the major disasters, you know, and hopefully we won't get the wildfires. I talked to Betty Bayless, lovely woman, who told me we took in very severely burned patients into one of the world's here in Arizona best burn centers. We have resources. We have been willing to share. We've been sharing our water for a long time, but we need to start taking care of us because these needy people are becoming here. And I want to thank my Mayor, Kate, for her dad's best team beating my team because we're in the playoffs Monday, and go Buckeyes.
Thank you, Ms. Barker. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website. Any comments received 2 hours prior to the meeting have been shared with the committee members in advance of the meeting for consideration and will be included in the formal meeting minutes. Staff, have we received any online written comments for call to the audience?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have received no written comments for the call to the audience or any other item on today's.
Thank you. We will move on to item 4A is for information only. Does any member of the committee have any questions or request a presentation on this item? Hearing none, the next agenda item is number 5, and that is approval of the consent agenda. And 5A through 5I are on the consent agenda. Do any members of the committee have questions or request a presentation on any of these items? Hearing none, prior to the approval of the consent agenda, there is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on any item on the consent agenda. I have received one request to speak, and that is from Andrew Marwick.
Oh, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
This pertains to 5B, part of the 2025-2030 estimates of costs. The cost estimates for the SR 30 Loop 303 connection, which is about 15 miles, is about $4 billion. That's only a portion of the total expenses. Extending it back to the Durango curve and out to SR 35, SR 85 would be another couple billion probably. It seems to be an incredible amount of percentage of the budget. Again, a huge ticket item when there's a lot of areas, the pavement that's disintegrating, the rubberized asphalt that has to be other things. The bigger problem with that, besides just the cost of it, is, for example, the 202 South Mountain Freeway. That's been open a little over 5 years now, and that has not alleviated traffic through Central Phoenix at all. If anything, it's getting worse coming in on the 202 and heading out on the 10 going westbound. The SR 30 will just be an invitation to build more in the far Southwest Valley and South Goodyear and Buckeye and Palo Verde and Unagila Bend. It's when there's so many infill opportunities. I was just driving up and down Bell Road yesterday in North Phoenix. There's so many places and so many vacant lots, so many underutilized facilities up there that could be redeveloped with a part like the Harkins Theater near 32nd Street. And when you build these freeways further out, it increases congestion further in. These people are not going to stop on the SR 30. They're not going to stop at the 202 South Mountain. They're going to come through in downtown Phoenix. You look at Chicago, LA, Dallas. As these freeways get built further out, the congestion just keeps getting worse and worse going through the center of those cities. Phoenix is experiencing the same trend, as just a few decades behind those other cities. The worst part of it, though, is the heat island. The last few summers it's just been getting worse and worse. 110-degree days used to be rare in Phoenix. It used to end a little over 100. Now, last year there were 70 days over 110. Nighttime lows rarely dip under the upper 80s at night for 2 or 3 months. So this is something that is continuing to build further and further out. It has to be a priority to find some way to bring that under control. And how the area is developed. These paving further and further out is just simply obviously going to make it worse. How much worse? There needs to be some more studies on that. But there's plenty of redevelopment opportunities closer in Glendale, Mesa, etc. And building further out into Buckeye is just going to make the problem clearly worse.
Thank you so much, Mr. Marwick. Staff, do we have any online written comments for the consent agenda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do not have any online written comments for the consent agenda today.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Daniels, a second by Mayor Freeman. And for those participating in the meeting online, take part of the voice vote by turning on their cameras and unmuting their audio. For those who cannot or do not turn on their cameras, staff will conduct a roll call vote. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call vote. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room and those online? Those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Staff, can you take a roll call of the members participating virtually who did not turn on their cameras?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Haney, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. And just for double checking, John Graham, how do you?
Aye.
Thank you. Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. We will move on to items proposed to be heard. Item number 6. This item is on the agenda for action and will be presented by Quinn Castro, Transportation Engineer. Thank you so much for being here, Quinn.
Thank you, Chair, members of TPC. I'm here to present on the Freeway Lifecycle Program Minor Improvements Funding Request for Interstate 10, Verrado Way to Citrus Road, and HOV restripe. So just for some background, as you know, anyone that lives in the region here is aware that the West Valley continues to experience significant growth and development leading to traffic congestion. This growth is expected to continue both in residential and commercial arenas, outpacing the existing capacity of Interstate 10. So MAG conducted an analysis of traffic congestion, looking at traffic in November of 22, 23, and 24, and this showed diminished travel speeds. So first, I want to orient you to your project location. Bottom left-hand side of your screen, you'll see in blue, this is I-10 Verrado to Citrus Road. It's currently 3 lanes in each direction. Looking a little closer at this area, again, the project area is in blue, but I want to point out that the I-10 85 to Verrado widening that was recently completed in 2023. So this full corridor here is 3 lanes in each direction. Here's an overview of that. What you'll see here and what I'll be talking about more in this presentation is that 16-foot wide inside shoulder there. So getting into the data, this is our current and future traffic volumes. As of 2023, in each direction, we have approximately 66,000 vehicles traveling on this corridor. By 2030, 68,000 vehicles, and by 2040, 86,000 vehicles. So that's an increase of 30%. Now we're going to be looking at the traffic congestion. Along the bottom of your screen here, you'll see gradations from green to red. The green is a travel speed of 60 or greater, into red where you're looking at less than 30 miles per hour. So this would be your morning commute towards downtown. You'll see that in 2022, during construction of that Verrado to 85 project, traffic didn't look too bad. This is 2023 as soon as that was opened. And this is November of last year. So for your morning commute, same area. During construction, or pardon me, this is your evening commute. During construction, you see a lot of red with those decreased travel speeds. As soon as we had that additional 3rd lane, and this is last year, you see the diminished speeds growing already. So the Freeway Lifecycle Program is MAG's tool for the implementation of our freeway and highway projects funded through Prop 400. The FLCP includes $10 million annually for minor improvements. Previously, this amount had been $5 million. It was increased so that we could have additional projects for quick deployment and low cost. This item today is a request for $3 million in funding for our fiscal year 2025. And I'd like to point out that this is the 2nd minor improvement request for fiscal year 25. So this is what your current cross section looks like. If you look towards the center in blue, that's the 16-foot wide inside shoulder. And the proposal here is to restripe that and have a 12-foot travel lane and a 4-foot inside shoulder. So then it would look approximately like this. The project schedule is that we've been working with ADOT and their design is currently underway. They plan to be able to advertise for construction sometime late spring, early summer of this year, and roll right into construction this fall. Construction would then be complete early 2026, and we would have the HOV and 3 general purpose lanes in each direction. So today's action requested is recommend approval to program $3 million from the Freeway Lifecycle Program minor improvements allocation to the Interstate 10 Verrado Way to Citrus Road HOV restripe. Thank you, Chair. Members of TPC, I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Excellent. Thank you, Quinn. Are there any questions or comments on this agenda item? Yes, Mayor Freeman.
Hey, thank you. Not familiar with the area. Is Citrus Way east or west of Verrado Way? You know, just being from the East Valley, so I know which direction this is going.
Sure. Madam Chair, members of TPC, good question. This is west of the I-10-303 system interchange.
And then west of Verrado Way?
This would be, sorry, from Verrado to Citrus. It is east of Verrado.
Madam Chair, members of the TPC, so Verrado is further out towards the west, towards the city of Buckeye itself.
Correct.
And then as you travel in, Citrus is very close to that Loop 303, so it's a little bit further to the east.
I just think for future, maybe we can have some geographical idea, north, south, east, west. So us East Valley people kind of know.
Sure.
Thank you.
Being from the East Valley, I appreciate that as well. Great.
That's my question, Chair.
Thank you. Prior to voting, there is an opportunity for the public to comment on this item. I have received no comments for this agenda item. Staff, have we received any comments online for this agenda item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have not received any online written comments for this item.
Okay, and this is for action. Is there a motion to recommend approval for programming $3 million from the Freeway Lifecycle Program minor improvement allocation to the Interstate 10 Verrado Way to Citrus Road HOV restripe project? Yes, we have a motion. And
Second.
A second.
Councilmember White.
Thank you. And we will have those participating in the meeting online take part in the voice vote by turning on their cameras, unmuting their audio, and please leave your camera on until after the roll call vote. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room and those online? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And those opposed say nay. Staff, can you take a roll call vote of the members participating virtually who did not turn on their camera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Haney, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is for information discussion only and will be presented by Armida Saeed, the Transportation Policy and Initiatives Program Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. I believe it still is, members of Transportation Policy Committee. I'm here today to present an overview of regional construction cost trends. Today, I'll start off my presentation by giving a brief background on the study, as well as talking through national construction market trends. Before then, moving on to talk about what occurred on the regional level, ultimately combining the impact of the two by speaking to the impact on regional freeway project costs, before concluding today by looking ahead and talking about next steps. So starting off with the background, as part of managing the Freeway Lifecycle Program in coordination with the Arizona Department of Transportation, we're constantly monitoring these construction costs to ensure that our regional freeway project estimates are reflecting the latest market conditions. In recent times, since the onset of the pandemic, these construction costs have gone through some significant fluctuations. And so as a result, we've undertaken this comprehensive cost trends analysis. And so just some brief background, really when you're looking into construction costs, you're really looking at the inputs that make up a contract bid. And so that consists of materials, it consists of equipment, it consists of labor, and then there's the element of profit and overhead. And so this study really focused on those first three elements. So on the national market scale, there were several different events that occurred since 2019 that impacted the price of these inputs. So in 2019, before the pandemic, it was considered to be a relatively stable market. Activity was increasing, but increasing at a moderate scale. So prices were also increasing at that moderate scale. Then in 2020, the pandemic hit. It was a global shutdown and all activity paused. And then in 2021, in an effort to stimulate the economy, there were federal measures that were enacted, things like the American Rescue Plan Act that injected funding into the economy for infrastructure projects. Federal interest rates were historically low, and all of this drove demand back up for construction. On the flip side, the supply chain for construction had not yet fully recovered from the pandemic. And so it could not keep up with that increase in demand. And that gap between that construction demand and supply started to appear and increase the costs of construction. This was further compounded by those low interest rates, which drove inflation and other global events occurring at the time. Then in 2023, you started to see impacts of other federal measures start to be realized. So, for example, the impact of the CHIPS Act, which really incentivized manufacturing investment and demand for manufacturing construction. You can see that quantified here on this chart, which compares the total manufacturing construction starts compared to the total construction starts. And really, you're seeing that peak there in 2023 compared to that flat line, which reflects the total construction starts. On the flip side, with the supply chain, that same legislation and others introduced further requirements, incentives on material sourcing, and how construction inputs were supplied, adding further pressures to that supply chain, growing that gap between supply and demand. Ultimately, in 2024, you got to what was called the new normal, where prices were no longer increasing at a significant rate, but they were high. They were much higher than the pre-pandemic era, and they remained high. And again, you can see that here when you look at the producer price index, looking at the construction inputs, and you can start to see that trend line start to remain high, but flatten out further as you get to 2024 and on. So moving on now to talk about what happened at the regional market scale. With the regional construction market, we were feeling all the same things that were happening at that national level, but it was further heightened. And it was further heightened because of all the construction activity that was concentrated in the region, which was actually outpacing what was happening statewide and also what was happening nationwide. And you can see that when you look at this graph that compares the construction spending index for nationwide compared to statewide compared to the region. What was really driving that, number one, was the amount of manufacturing investment in the region. The Greater Phoenix area was considered the top manufacturing market between 2020 to 2023, as well as all of the residential construction activity driven by all of the population growth we also saw during that time frame. As a result, this really put a strain on construction materials that are typically sourced at a regional level, things like aggregates, asphalt, and cement. These are typically materials that are used across all different construction sectors. You can really see this when you consider the price of aggregates, which is typically sourced locally in almost every area across the country. So since 2019, Arizona has actually seen the 8th largest increase in the price of aggregates. Moving on now to talk about another shared resource, which is labor. Looking at workforce availability, the unemployment rate in the state compared to nationwide has, for the most part, been lower than nationwide, signaling a much tighter employment market. The 3.1% at the end of 2024 is the second lowest rate it's been since 2007. And this has led to a growing cost for labor. And you can see this when you compare the average wage increase nationwide versus in the region. And so all of those combined have led to an increase in the construction cost at a higher rate than has been occurring nationwide. So here is the National Construction Cost Index developed by the Federal Highway Administration in comparison to the one developed by the Arizona Department of Transportation. Here's a further breakdown of that shown by the different major bid categories, showing the overall percentage increase in those categories since 2020. Now I'll illustrate the combined impact of those national and regional trends on our regional freeway project costs. I'll do that by illustrating using 3 different regional freeway projects that went to construction back in fiscal year 2021. So starting with a project first on Loop 303, a widening project. Back in fiscal year 2021, this widening project on Loop 303 cost $17.9 million. In 2024, this project would have cost $35.8 million, which is an increase of over 99.9%, driven primarily by concrete, earthwork, as well as structures. Looking at another project, a interchange on Loop 202, in fiscal year 2021, this project cost $18.2 million. In 2024, it would have been $43 million, which is an increase of 136%, driven again primarily by those 3 top categories. And then finally, one last project illustration looking at a new interim freeway, State Route 24. In 2021, it cost about $66.5 million. In fiscal year 2024, it would have been $156.7 million, an increase of about 135%, driven by primarily by concrete, earthwork, and drainage. Particularly for freeway project types of this nature, new freeways, earthwork will be a significant cost driver because it's seen a significant cost increase and also because of the large quantity that's required. So looking ahead, we can expect a lot of these trends to continue. There will continue to be strong demand for construction in the region, and we will continue to face a lot of the similar pressures on our regional supply chain. The good news is that thanks to the previous work done by this body, we've got several management tools in place that have allowed us to successfully navigate the Prop 400 freeway program during this tumultuous period. And so just to wrap up my presentation today, construction costs have increased and they will likely continue to remain high in the future. Thankfully, we've been able to successfully navigate the Prop 400 freeway program because of those management tools shown on the previous slide. Where we'll really see these cost impacts start to play out is when we look ahead at the Prop 479 freeway program. A lot of those cost updates are currently underway, and we expect to give an overview of that program in the upcoming months. The good news, as will be presented in the next agenda item, is that those revenue forecasts have also increased. So that concludes my presentation today, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Arminta. Appreciate that. And like you said, although it is bad news, we get to hear good news next. And although these numbers are very staggering, sitting here, none of us are surprised because we're all dealing with this in our own communities, our own businesses. And really, I mean, there's a lot of factors that come into play, but victims of our own success, being one of the top manufacturing across the country, as well as having such great communities that's driving new residential growth here in the communities that we serve. And but it's so nice to have quantitative figures that we know it's growing so rapidly. So to look at specific projects, recognize what that project cost just a number of years ago and what it would be today. I know in my own community, we've referenced this already. And so I appreciate these numbers and the presentation. Are there any comments? Yes, Ms. Daniels.
Thank you. This is something that we discuss often at ADOT and have a lot of conversation and dialogue around. And one of the things I think is important to note is sometimes we compete against ourselves, particularly with a limited labor market. And so just being cognizant of sometimes when we have more projects than bodies to assist and labor to help. So we do compete against ourselves on occasion. One of the things that I thought was really interesting last week, there was a new legislative all the new legislators got together and ADOT did sort of an overview with them. And one of the things that they did not realize is that once they provide an earmark for a project, maybe they have a specific identified project, it really doesn't end up in the 5-year program until year 3 of the current 5-year program. So yes, there's some reprioritization, but by the time, if you look at these escalation costs, the earmarks that they set aside 3 years ago are not nearly enough to actually cover the actual costs of the construction. I offered to them that if they gave us multi-year budgets, we would absolutely be able to help address this, which they were not interested in discussing. But I do think it's just another component that we need to be aware of is that as we're working with legislators, particularly, I don't know if you guys saw what came out of appropriations yesterday, but they are expecting a surplus. A lot of those dollars will end up, I think, ultimately, because they're one-time funds going towards transportation and infrastructure projects or will be made available through the legislators for that. We do have to be thinking in that longer lens. So today's projections just aren't going to be enough likely to cover those projects. So just something for us to be aware of as we're rebalancing all of the funds and the funding strategies and opportunities that we might have in our state.
Excellent points. Thanks, Ms. Daniels. Any other comments? Any online? They're anxious for the good news part. So we will move right into that. That is item, again, thank you for your presentation. Item number 8, and this is for information and discussion and will be presented by Patrick Stone, our Deputy Transportation Director.
Thank you, Chair Wheatley, members of the Transportation Policy Committee. Pleasure to be here today to present this item. My rosy outlook somewhat staggered by the previous presentation. So to kind of orient the committee, we always talk about the Regional Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Investment Plan, or RSTIP. It's kind of the basis of those funding decisions made in this region, unanimously adopted by the Regional Council back in June of 2021. Really guides the region's transportation investments up through 2045, served as the basis of the extension of Prop 479, and as always, state statute requires that this document be fiscally constrained. For members of the committee that have been here, you have seen this slide. For new members, I'll take a moment, pause, explain this slide. Really what we're doing here is we're taking a glance at that investment plan. The top kind of highlights where those investments go. Lower left-hand corner, we discuss the programmatic investments, sort of a pivot in this plan in that we have funding set aside for programs. And then for today's discussion, I get to focus on the lower right-hand corner, which are the revenues. The plan as it exists today has an anchor of $28.2 billion made up of a variety of funding sources available to the region. I'll go through those funding sources and kind of talk about those revenue projections. So the RSTIP, the revenue sources, the RSTIP, when it was developed back in 2020 and 2021, considered all revenue sources available to the region at that time. These include the dedicated half-cent sales tax. This represents a 40-year legacy of regional investments in transportation infrastructure, going back to Prop 300, continued through Prop 400, and now continued again through 479. The Highway User Revenue Fund, piggybacking a little bit off Member Daniels' comments, this really represents those state funds available to the region, made up primarily of vehicle license tax and then the gas tax within the state. Excuse me. We then have funding made available by our federal partners through the Federal Highway Administration. This comes to the region actually in two ways. First, there are those dollars that make up the Freeway Lifecycle Program that Armenta mentioned earlier, managed and programmed in cooperation with our partners at ADOT. We then also have funding made directly available to the region that's sub-allocated to MAG as part of FHWA funding. And then finally, we also have formula funding allocated to the region in the transit space through the Federal Transit Administration. So that anchor number, the $28.2 billion, as I said, it was developed back in 2020, 2021. Some things were going on back then. We were right at the height of the COVID pandemic. They did not know where revenue projections were going to go. On the federal side, the FAST Act, which was the prior surface transportation legislation, had been extended a year. We did not know what surface transportation reauthorization would look like or the funds associated with that. And then also the funding and a bit of a nuanced slide. It was done in constant dollars. So when we built the RSTIP, projects didn't have specific years. We didn't say a project A was going to be in this specific year. We said it was going to be in a phase. So to account for that phasing, we did projects in constant dollars, not in year of expenditure. Net result, the region did take a very conservative approach in the RSTIP, and you'll see that reflected in the updated numbers. So the graph, apologize a little bit on the small text. So what we're really going to talk about is those numbers in the RSTIP, the 2020 numbers. We're going to then inflate those numbers, and then we're going to talk about them in 2024. So here's the $28.2 billion broken out in the 5 different funding categories. What we did is we took that number and we said, okay, well, let's take those numbers in year of expenditure. And so we've inflated those numbers to 2024, or excuse me, in 2020 to year of expenditure. You can then see the growth there. So we moved from 28.2 billion to 39.7 billion, an increase of 11.5 billion. And then, because 4 years of data has actually occurred between 2020 and 2024, we took those old projections and then updated them to new projections reflecting impacts of the half-cent sales tax and also federal transportation legislation. And there you see the growth again, moving up to 48.1 billion. So what that means, the 2024 year of expenditure is 21% higher than 2020 year of expenditure, 70% higher than what was in the RSTIP that was approved back in 2021. So what does it mean? What are the impacts? So the largest growth category, no surprise, was actually in the half-cent sales tax. This really makes sense if you think about it. Back when the pandemic was occurring, that we had very conservative projections on the sales tax. Those numbers have been increased. HERF is the only category to show a decline. So the numbers actually went down in HERF, kind of reflecting the diminished purchasing power of the gas tax. Federal revenues increased. So since that time, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, historic surface transportation bill, brought additional dollars into the region. And one thing to note, the impacts that we see in the revenues, they're disproportionately higher in the short term, which if you think about RARF, if we have the projections didn't change as far as year over year. We kind of assume around a 5.5% growth rate, but the base grew. So when the old projections in 2020 to the projections today, we have a significant increase in the base because we have better data that tells us those numbers are going to be higher. Where to go from here? As noted, inflation was accounted for as part of the development of the RSTIP. As Armenta's presentation noted, those increases are far outstripping what we see in the revenue side. They do get offset, partially offset. I can't fully fund the increases that you saw. So what do? We're going to continue the 3 life cycle programs. We have both the arterial life cycle program that deals with the street program, we have the freeway program, and then we have the transit life cycle programs. Those will continue development throughout calendar year 2025. I do not see impacts as much in the arterial and transit space. Twofold. One, the revenue sources that go into them are a little more resilient. And then also the way the cost structure is in those 2 programs and the region's commitment to those programs is fairly different than what you see in the freeway program. And then as noted earlier, the impacts of the freeway program will be part of conversations starting next month. And with that, Madam Chair and members of the committee, that concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Any questions or comments for Patrick? Any online? Okay. Thank you so much for the
Thank you all.
presentation, Patrick. We will move on to item number 9. This is on the agenda for information and discussion only and will be presented by Carrie Kassler, the transportation planner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hello, members of TPC. Today, I'll be providing an update on the Proposition 479 Arterial Life Cycle Program policies and procedures. So first, I'll begin with an overview of the program itself under the current Prop 400. So the Arterial Life Cycle Program, or the ALCP, is currently a program outlined in the Regional Transportation Plan that is supported by Proposition 400. Overall, this program has been a resounding success over the past 20 years. The policies were originally developed in 2004, and the administration and maintenance of the program are guided by this document. It has been updated several times for various things, and the latest update was approved by Regional Council this past June. Any updates made to this document is generated by the input of the ALCP working group and presented through the MAG committee process for approval. So this document was used as the base for the Prop 479 ALCP. As stated before, the Prop 400 ALCP was and continues to be a success, so there's no need to reinvent the wheel here. We simply use this document and change aspects to better align with the new program. Many of the foundational elements remain unchanged. The funding model remains the same, continuing the 70-30 split between regional funds and the local match contribution. The approach to handling project savings is unchanged, where savings can only be reallocated once the original project has been completed and all associated requirements have been met. And the current process for regional funding closeout begins 1 month before the annual update of the ALCP, and this is intended to remain the same under the new program. The function of the program remains the same and many of the administrative elements remain consistent, but there are a couple things that really separate the two programs, and we will begin to discuss those now. So the Prop 479 ALCP continues to be the financial management tool of the arterial street component of the Regional Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Investment Plan, or the RSTIP. It contains a list of 91 defined projects supported by Prop 479, and the program will be guided by the policies and procedures for the management and oversight of the program, which is exactly what we're here today to discuss. So here you can see an overview of the arterial projects included in the RSTIP from Phase 1 through Phase 4 over the 20-year span of the program. Arguably the biggest difference between the Prop 400 and the Prop 479 ALCP are the funding sources. The current ALCP under Prop 400 has two funding sources, the first being the dedicated half-cent sales tax, and the second being Federal Highway Administration formula funds that are allocated to the MAG region. The Prop 479 ALCP is funded entirely by regional funding, also known as the half-cent sales tax. I want to note that while the funding sources are shifting, this actually results in more funding for the program because of a bigger allocation of the regional funds under the new program. And additionally, the use of regional funds only is easier for the member agencies, as regional funds are a bit more flexible than federal funds. So these are the 5 key objectives that were discussed and agreed upon by the ALCP working group that really guide everything going forward. So the key tenets include effective and efficient implementation of the RSTIP, ensuring that projects are implemented in a manner consistent with the RSTIP, fiscal integrity and coordinating with the RSTIP in financial accounting and reporting policies, accountability, effective and efficient project implementation, and employing comprehensive documentation and legal instruments to outline the roles and responsibilities of the agencies involved, transparency in providing members of the public, elected officials, stakeholders, participating agencies, and others with ready access to information on the program and each individual project. And finally, compliance with all applicable federal, state, and local requirements in implementing of the projects. So now we'll begin discussion on some of the other elements that require a bit more consideration and development with the input of this committee. So as mentioned, a working group of member agency staff has been meeting since June 24 and has developed an initial draft of the policies, but there are several policy items that remain. So one of the new elements included in the policies is for member agencies to post signage at the project site acknowledging the role of regional funds in the project. This requirement will be noted in the new project agreement template, which is the legal document between MAG and the member agency. So here you can see an example of the City of Phoenix project for the project on Happy Valley, where they highlight the role of Prop 400 funds in their project. So the next consideration is that of the project change tool. In the current policies of Prop 400, it outlines a specific criteria that's required by member agencies to outline and then be used by the MAG committees to evaluate proposed project changes. Upon discussion with the working group, the main takeaway was and question was whether the current process really does what we want it to do, and if it allows agencies to accurately and adequately explain why the new project is a better fit for the program as opposed to the one that was originally outlined. So transparency is really key, since the RCIP was unanimously approved by MAG Regional Council and then passed by the voters. So it's important that the tool reflects that the need has changed and that the data supports that change as well. So as a result, MAG staff recommends utilizing the criteria originally used to evaluate projects to get them into the RCIP as the quantitative data, and the qualitative criteria developed by the working group, which I will show next. So here you can see the evaluative criteria. As stated, the quantitative data is what was used to get the projects into the program in the RCIP originally. And then the qualitative data on the lower half of the slide, this is modeled after the criteria developed for the arterial competitive programs. And this really focuses on whether the new project meets the stated goals of the ALCP. It also allows an opportunity for agencies to highlight unique attributes or circumstances for a new project that may not be able to be captured in the quantitative data. And then finally, safety considerations for the new projects. Next is the matter of inflation. So language outlining the process of inflating project reimbursements annually was originally included in the Prop 400 ALCP policies and procedures. This language was removed from the policies in response to the Great Recession in 2008 and revenue implications caused by economic downturn. So the consensus of the working group was the need to add this language into the new program. So because of that, MAG staff recommends adding language to the policies that outline the process of inflating project costs, and each year MAG will update and release the inflation rate information. Next, I want to highlight some of the key dates that are outlined in the policies, specifically to do with when reimbursable expenditures can be incurred. The policies help guide when and how agencies can seek reimbursement for eligible project expenditures. In addition, these dates also allow member agencies to use previously incurred costs to help fulfill the agency's match requirement. And the proposed dates align with the passage of the RCIP by the voters. As a result, we recommend the following dates for project development reimbursements, like right-of-way incurred on or after July 1 of 2024 to be eligible for reimbursement. Construction and related activities must have begun after November 5th of 2024 to be reimbursable. And project development costs incurred between July 1 of 2022 and June 30th of 2024, also referenced here as after fiscal year 2022, can be used toward the local match requirement. So here's an overview of the development of the program. First is the development of the policies and procedures for the Prop 479 ALCP. This is where we currently are and will continue to work through this development before we take the final document through the policy committees later this spring. This step must be completed first before any changes can be made to the outlined ALCP projects. Next, as we've seen in a previous item, revenue estimates will be updated as well as regional funding amounts and considering the impacts of inflation. Future conversations are needed to understand the impacts on the ALCP and project budgets, which leads directly into, there's the other one, directly into the last step, which is identifying the specific sequencing of the projects within each phase. So this will determine whether a project is reimbursed in fiscal year 26 or fiscal year 2030, both of which are in phase 1 of the program, but are very different for project implementation. Again, this effort cannot begin until there is an approved policy document. Madam Chair and members, that is the conclusion of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Carrie. What questions or comments do we have for Carrie? Yes, Ms. Daniels.
Just one. Sometimes we adopt policies with all good intentions and find 5 years from now that perhaps we missed an opportunity or have found a better way to do things. Are these amendable throughout the life of the program?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and members. This the policies are a dynamic document, so any changes or updates that we feel are necessary or the membership thinks is necessary can be brought through and are developed by the ALCP working group and then will be taken through the MAG committee process.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. We did begin the 57th legislature just this week, and so we will have an update from Samantha Klakulak. She is our government relations project manager and will be providing us with that update this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of TPC. So as the chair just stated, this past Monday kicked off the 57th first regular session at the legislature. Governor Hobbs gave her State of the State, where she addressed issues such as affordable housing, border security, education, childcare, employment, and water. The governor's executive budget will be coming out later this week, as well as the Joint Legislative Budget Committee baseline report. So we will have more to report on that at the next meeting. As of this morning, there were 342 bills that have been dropped, and we are tracking those that are related to the work that we do here at MAG, including environmental planning, housing, and homelessness, and of course, transportation. I would like to provide a brief update on what we are tracking so far. HB 2002, Transportation Tax Deposit County Board. This bill is addressing Pinal's collected revenues of the now struck down RTA tax. This will not have an impact on Prop 479 funding. SB 1086, Transportation System Performance ADOT. This bill is similar to a bill that was introduced last session that addresses transportation planning related definitions and transportation system performance factors for highway, arterial, and transit projects. Prop 479 enabling legislation does point to this statute, so this bill could have implications on the implementation of Prop 479. So we are tracking this closely as it moves through the process. SB 1092, Vehicle Mileage Tracking Tax Prohibitions. This is also a repeat from the last few years that prohibits the tracking of vehicle miles traveled or collecting a fee based on per mile charge. We are tracking this as part of our air quality efforts at MAG, but also monitoring any implications that this could have on the modernization of HERF as we move into the future. There have been several appropriations bills related to transportation that we are tracking as well. And with that, that completes my report.
Thank you, Samantha. Any questions for Samantha? We are very much looking forward to just a fantastic legislative session and many more updates to come on those bills and more. So we appreciate that and we'll look forward to more discussion in the future.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members.
Next, we have requests for future agenda items. Are there any requests from the membership for an item on a future agenda? All right, hearing none. The next is comments from the committee. Any comments or announcements from the membership? And there are none. We are starting off this new year's fantastic, ahead of schedule. I love it. With that, I do want to wish everyone a happy new year, and this meeting is adjourned. Our next Transportation Policy Committee will be Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. Thank you.